Hello and welcome to the Clyde FC Podcast live with me, Paul Shanks. And as always, I have my right-hand man, Mr. John Boyce, with me. Boycey, how you doing?
Aye, not too bad, Paul. How's yourself?
All good, my friend, all good. And I'm delighted to say that we have a third Clyde fan joining us tonight to discuss all things Clyde. It is the one and only Craig Black. Craig, how you doing?
I'm very well, Paul. Very well. How you guys doing?
Smashing. Delighted that you agreed to come and join us. We shall come and ask you some stories, or get you to give us some stories, I should say. And I've got a few questions for you as well, and see what you can give us. But first of all, we were hoping that we would be looking ahead to a home match against Forfar. Unfortunately, and probably somewhat unsurprisingly, the match has fallen foul again of the ongoing COVID issues at the club. The club have released a statement through the SPFL. I'll quickly read it. It's only 3 sentences, just for those that may or may not have actually seen it yet. So it just goes, Saturday's Scottish League One match between Clyde and Forfar Athletic at Broadwood Stadium has been postponed after Clyde informed the SPFL that they could not fulfil the fixture. Clyde have informed the SPFL that due to a number of players currently self-isolating, they have insufficient players to fulfil the fixture, and finishes up by saying, as a result, and in line with the standard procedure, the SPFL has postponed the fixture pending an investigation into the circumstances leading to the postponement. Now, it was a very similar statement to what was released last week. There is obviously this ongoing investigation. There will be plenty of speculation, obviously given the recent outcomes of other investigations involving Kilmarnock and St Mirren. Now, it's far too early and we're not in the know to say obviously what way it's going to go. Generally speaking, how are you guys feeling about the postponement and general outlook for matches ahead?
Yeah, obviously it's disappointing we don't have any football this weekend again. We were treated to it, I feel, the last few weeks before that. But on the postponements and general feeling about this COVID situation at the club, the statement showed that the 4 players are doing well, which is always good to see. We did kind of touch upon it last week that the players that had to self-isolate probably would be out the 14 days as the joint response group kind of protocols. And as a Clyde fan, it's good to see that we have been following those protocols from the statements, as obviously that's all we can go on. So yeah, disappointed and hopeful that we've been doing the right things and the investigation comes out okay. Craig, what do you think?
I totally agree. I think that the protocols that the club have got, they're really, really stringent with them. For being there at some of the training nights and the pre-season and in the games as well, you do have a bit of rigmarole to go through that all the players have to go through. So for first hand, I don't really see any reason why they haven't followed the protocol strictly. So from that point of view, hopefully everything will be all right with that. Obviously, we want the players to be okay. That's the first and foremost. We want them all to be fit and back fighting for us again as soon as possible. But no, it's concerning. That is concerning.
Just so you touched upon the protocols. Obviously, you will have to follow them for attending match days when obviously you're doing the photography. Can you give us just a very brief overview of what the kind of general protocols are?
Well, on training days or on match days, you get David McPherson emails you a form, a health and questionnaire form that you have to submit. When you arrive, you have to park up and park socially distanced, and then you have to wait on your message when you get there. You have to wait on a message to say, right, you can now enter. You enter through your designated area. So, for instance, I'm not allowed in the main stand at all. I'm not allowed. There's a red zone, which is basically either side of the dugouts, right the way up, and in the tunnels, the 2 dugouts, anywhere where both sets of players can be, I'm not allowed. So when you arrive, you park up, You message them to say you're here. You get a text message to say, right, you can now come to the door. You get your temperature taken. You have to sanitise. You get a wristband, and then you're at your area that you'd like to be. So, from a photography point of view, I'm allowed in the long away stand under the scoreboard area, behind the wall. In that point, I'm not allowed onto the turf or onto the grass or the Astro, if you like. And I can go behind the goals, but again, I get a steward to escort me from one area to the other. I'm not allowed to walk anywhere near the dugout, so it is very, very strict, you know. So the club are doing, I think, everything that they possibly can, you know.
Well, it's not that I think anyone would expect anything different, but at the same time, it's good to hear firsthand that you're seeing everything being followed. So, as far as any investigation, hopefully that is the outcome that follows. The club obviously did release a statement as well earlier this week. I believe it was Wednesday, just touching upon the fact that they did believe that the actions and taking the players away from training had minimised the risk of the spread within the squad too. So I do think that there is a degree of confidence that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah. It's a lot of hard work that they've put into, to be fair, an awful lot of hard work. So.
Yeah, I think as well, you know, I think as well, the fact that we have had these cases come in, you know, the virus transmits very easily, as we've seen through news and everything else. So the fact that we've reacted the way that we have by cancelling training, etc., we've followed the correct procedures, and hopefully that reflects well on us to the SPFL.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's probably not a whole lot we can talk about with this. With a bit of luck, we'll be back next Saturday. So looking ahead, it would be home to Falkirk. Not exactly the easiest tie to come back on.
We've got a good record against Falkirk, though. We've got a good record with Falkirk.
No, absolutely. And if that was to continue, great. But at the moment, it's... We talked about this last week, boys, say that we've just not had a great run. We had the Thistle victory, then we had the Dumbarton postponement, we beat Montrose, then we've had this. So it's not been an ideal start to a season, 5 games in, albeit we're now in December. How do you see things going next week, boys? Say a lot will depend on player availability, obviously. But
yeah, as you've mentioned, like we did have that great win against Thistle, then a break, and then losses, and that obviously, you know, the performances moving forward, and then we beat Montrose, and now we have this. So again, I'll say it tests the players' mindsets. The majority of those players have been there through the last couple of years, and we've seen them being able to come back. So the mindset is there. They just need to unlock it again, and it's that consistency that we want to see. So Falkirk is going to be a tough ask, especially coming off, you know, the 4 players might have a bit of fatigue. They might not be match fit or fit at all. But yeah, we'll just need to roll with the punches and see how we go. But as always, I'll be positive. I'll say a 1-0 win. I'll revisit it next week.
Well, we can touch upon it next Friday live, and hopefully we'll have a full match preview to go through and discuss team lines. We've got a first comment of the evening. Just for anyone watching, if you do want to comment, leave a question for Craig. We have a comment from Fraser Ogilvie, who looks like a Forfar fan, saying that won the Loons. We'll let you away with that, Fraser. But seriously, hope all the people affected make a full recovery soon. And obviously, we completely agree with that. We hope that the 4 boys are back up and running as soon as possible. So, will we come to yourself, Craig, now?
Okay.
So, can you first of all just give us a wee bit about your role at the club? Obviously, we most people know you. Clyde fans, I should say, know you as the club photographer. Yeah. How did you kind of come about the role, and what do you do, basically?
It was about an accident. I had my son Lewis was down as being match mascot one day, and so I was obviously there and with a decent looking bit of camera kit, and Angela, I think it was Angela Blythe, was doing the mascot coordinator at the time, And when you're carrying a decent bit of camera kit, it's, do you do photography? And I'm like, yeah, can I dabble at that point? And so that was it. The kind of day went by, got some pictures of Lewis, and there you go. That was that. And then the next thing, she contacted me and said, look, I think it was James Traynor couldn't make it. One Saturday, would I be able to go down and just help out? I said, sure. Never done sports photography at that point, so I'll give it a go. And then a few weeks later, John Taylor phoned me and said, look, James is looking to take a step back. Would you be willing to do what you can? And at that point, I mean, my wife Lynn works shifts and we've got 3 kids. So I was like, look, John, I'm happy to help. I'll do whatever I can as often as I can, but I can't guarantee I would do it every week. But it just developed, pardon the pun, developed from there. It went, and then you get more kit, you get more experience, and it's been fantastic. It's an absolute honour and privilege to do it. I love it. It's been great.
Obviously, at the moment, once matches are actually going, you're one of the privileged Clyde fans that are actually getting to take in the matches. Now, how are you finding it? Is it still difficult to bite your tongue when incidents happen? Or
and it's because there's no background noise. I think
you kind of get away with it as much.
Whatever you shout through that mask, it projects. So you have to be very cautious. But no, I try, and the shouts that I do, I try and encourage the boys more than anything else, because I think we've got one of the best and most vocal fan groups in the whole league. I think that they've really made a big difference in the last 2 seasons. As soon as Danny came on board and there was that link up between the fans and the team was incredible, and I think that's been sorely missing for us in the games that we've played. I think the messages that they had before the Thistle game had a big impact on the boys that day. So without a doubt, it's a strange thing. You hear every single shout from both sets of players and the benches, even from the distance that I'm shooting from. So it's a strange thing. I can't wait for everybody to get back in. Can't wait.
Oh, right. Definitely. The couple of the squad that we've done interviews with Mitch and we Mark Lamont as well, and they've echoed exactly what you said there, Craig, that they just can't wait for the fans to get back. The vocal backing is very important to them. Boise, I think you've mentioned this repeatedly. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, we've heard the players and Danny say in interviews that we're the ones that get them right up and going for any potential comebacks that are needed, or just that extra wee lift. So, Craig, it's good that you're that one man just now that can really push us forward. That's it. I was going to ask as well, though, like with the winter kind of coming in, how are you getting yourself motivated to get out there with the camera?
It's actually where they've got me positioned now. I'm more sheltered than I've ever been. So it's almost like I've got a big canopy at my back now, because usually if you see me, I'm sitting in front of the main stand to either the left of the dugouts or the right of the dugouts, depending on what half we're shooting in, and it's extremely exposed at that point. Broadwood's a cold hole anyway.
It's got its own mini climate.
It's incredible. I mean, you can leave the house and you're in a t-shirt, and as soon as you get there, you need 4 layers on. But, so no, I'm slightly more sheltered at the away stand than what I'm used to.
Oh, that's good to hear.
A couple of other questions coming in. Boise, do you want to take the first one? I believe you may have vested interest in this.
Yeah, so this is from the Mrs. Kirsty, who's also a photographer. So she's asking, Craig, are you a Nikon or a Canon person?
I am a Canon man. Canon man. It's purely by accident. Why Canon? Why Nikon? Purely because the Canon seemed to fit better in my grip than the Nikon did. That's all.
Interesting. I've not got a clue about photography.
Some would argue you don't have a clue about football, Boise, but
just don't have a clue in general.
I'm sure there's a few that would share that view, but I try my best.
Rory Holmes is asking, with the players self-isolating, is there any word in Bully Wee the Bull? He's all right. Aye, I can let everyone know that the Bull is safe and well, and making sure that he's all right for winter. He's not going to go cold.
I'll tell you, that's one thing that is sorely missed is the Bully the Bull and the young kids that enjoy that day with Bully the Bull.
It's
a shame.
As much as I rant about being roasting after jumping about in that costume, I do miss it. I really do miss it. It's a good laugh, but it's memories for these kids.
Exactly.
And hopefully we can get mascots back in as soon as possible once the fans are in as well. But how viable that's going to be for this season, who knows?
What about a wee Bully the Bull pre-match show on the streaming services?
It's not a bad idea.
No. Unless somebody wants to sponsor it, then fine. Get a sponsor for it, and the Bull will dance on camera whatever we want. Fine.
The Bull will dance.
Everyone,
we'll move back to you, Craig. Let's say the Bull. More on Craig. Have you got any particular stories from the touchline? Any funny moments? Run-ins with officials?
I thought since you guys asked me to come on, I thought about how best to put it. One of my more infamous ones was at the Peterhead game, where it was the one that Banksy scored his wonder goal.
3-3. Yeah. 3-3 match,
Yeah. And you know the standard of refereeing that we have experienced at Broadwood over the years. Well, on that day in the first half, I'm not even going to mention the referee's name, but it was exceptionally brilliant that day. And everybody was getting frustrated, and me more than some, I would say. So I did, when I was behind the goals in the first half, I did mouth or shout or something to him, which I won't obviously repeat live on the stream, but and he did turn and look at me. It was after a couple of bad tackles on Christmas Day that went unpunished. And so at half-time, I get my kit and I go round to do the half-time draw picture and then reset up. And one of the Clyde, so I say staff, so it remains nameless, said to me, the referee has asked me to warn you that one more outburst and he will stop the game and remove you from the side of the pitch. I thought, I was mortified. So it was a kind of verbal yellow card, and I thought, no,
you part of the match report?
You know, it's the last thing I needed. But no, at the end of the day, I'm there doing a job for the club, and so that was a quick lesson to me. So, but I tell you, everybody was the same that day. Everybody was raging them. I was just so glad that we Banksy popped up with that wonder strike to earn us a well justified 1 point, although it should have been 3.
Yeah, then we were 3-1 down as well. At one point in that match, we had I don't want to say being penalty, but yeah, there was a clear handball on the line. That
handball on the line, I actually got a shot of it, and I took it over to Danny at the dugout, and he was the near side linesman caught it tight off of Danny. But it was a blatant penalty, but these things happen, I suppose. So that's probably my most infamous one. So since then, I try and tone it down a bit. And I remember actually the playoff final game pre-match at the area when I was doing the shooting for Sid in the pre-match. Brian Ahern, who I'd met a few times, maybe being a guest and what have you, he introduced Craig Brown to me, which was lovely. You know, a legend that he is. And he said, Mr. Black, this is Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, here's Mr. Black. And Craig Brown kind of said, I'll not try and do his voice, but so you're the quiet photographer I've heard about. And I thought, oh my God, here we go.
Reputation, Craig.
Jeez, so that was nice though. That was nice.
Kirsty's had a follow-up question.
Yeah. So another couple ones. She's a Canon person too, Craig.
Good.
Has anyone ever hit your camera during a game, and do you need an assistant?
I love an assistant.
I can tell you should be very game to help out.
My two boys, Lewis and Cameron, are pitching in as assistants whenever they get the opportunity. I've had a close miss to my kit. Well, part of my kit at the Bonnie rig away pre-season friendly that we had. I went behind the goals where all the Bonnyrigg fans were standing on that slope behind the shed.
It's a massive slope.
Aye. So I was at the high end of the slope, and Ray Grant decided he was going to hit a rocket shot from about 18, 19 yards out, which took the cutest of deflections. And I'm looking down the lens, right? And I just see this ball rocketing straight towards me. And it was heading lower than my waistline would have liked. And lo and behold, whack, it hit my monopod. So the monopod's it's like a shaft, if you want to put it that way, that takes the weight of the camera.
This is a 7 p.m. show, Craig, just to remind you, it's not past the watershed yet, mate.
So that monopod done me a favour that day, let me put it that way. It broke, but it shielded me, so I was quite pleased with that. But that pre-season friendly cost me about 140 quid for a new monopod. But I was glad of it, I'll tell you honestly, I was glad of it, because I'd have been injured.
Boys, you want to take the rest of the questions?
Yeah, continue through the comments. So Cameron Hannah is asking, has it really stopped you from shouting at the ref though, Craig, a few times this season?
That's my stepson. No, not really. It's not really, to be honest. No, I do try, and whatever the nearest linesman is tends to get a bit tight as well. So.
And on this season as well, have you got some favourite shots you've had so far? I mean, I think most Clyde fans will love the David Goodwillie round in the keeper against Montrose. That's
so far been the kind of one that it's funny when you look back at some of the shots as you take them, and you check your screen to see what they look like. As soon as I caught that one, I was like, oh, I love that, absolutely love that one. That and the Ali Love scoring against Thistle was quite a special one for me as well.
Yeah, definitely captured some important moments throughout the years.
What I've loved, Craig, as well, is over the years is how you quite often find yourself in the actual celebrations with the camera. You're not distanced from it. You're right in the heart of it.
I tell you,
I love it. Living the dream.
Especially last season before rather. There was some when you seen the players running right over, especially in home games, right over to where the loud choir is, I feel like.
Yeah.
And you just want to dive in. You just want to jump into that that belay of players, but you're still trying to shoot and jump and shoot and stay back. And, it's been
for
great.
The playoff game, there was a steady progression of just players getting closer to you, and then jumping out to me is Norway, just with the kind of.
It's fun. There's a couple of wee video clips of Norway giving me a hug, and I think Banksy lifts wee Lewis up there as well and stuff, because he's ball boy at those games, and it's brilliant. The players are in magic, absolute magic.
No, we have one from D-Raw, who I believe is Danny Rockcliffe. Who's the biggest poser on the team? So I'm sure we could take a stab at that. But
that's easy. That is easy. That's the old Mr. Handsome, Tom Lang himself. He's friendly to the camera, isn't he? So,
is there any players that try and avoid you?
No, not really. I tell you, the most annoying thing is when they score and they tend to run. Sometimes they run the other way, and you're like, "Oh, you doing? I'm over here. I can see you. I'm the only one in the stand. What are you doing?" So, I don't think anybody. Hopefully, they don't avoid me. Hopefully not.
Just coming up shortly, we do have 2006 Scottish Cup legend Tom Brighton joining us. So please stay tuned for that, and obviously get involved. Ask him your questions. Give us your memories from that day. I'm sure Clyde fans, we have absolutely dozens that we would love to share. We could do a full hour. We could do probably 3 hours with him on it. But very much looking forward to it. I don't know about you guys.
Oh, brilliant.
Can't wait. I make it emotional think about
it. It was one hell of a player, I have to say. Only one season, but it was a great season. So, would you say that the playoff final was your finest hour as the photographer, or do you have any other highlights?
No, I'll be honest, the playoff final's been my finest hour as a Clyde fan. I think even going back to the league run in 99-2000, it peaked out for me as well. It was just, I think it meant so much for for so many of us after such a long period down there that we never seemed to get out of. You know, it was just monumental, and I think that being involved in it, playing a small part in the background, just made it all the more special. You know, and the players throughout the whole season were just fantastic. With myself, with Cameron and Lewis as well, they were just great bunch of guys. You know, I just feel they should have got a trophy or a medal. You know, as a player, it's the same as you do in England, so that they could have something to hold. You know what I mean? I'm desperate to get a picture of them holding a trophy. You know,
well, you never know.
Was,
I mean, the time hopefully will come sooner rather than later.
Yeah. So that's definitely my highlight. Yeah, without a doubt. I think I fired off about 2,500 shots that day, which is just,
what's your normal kind of range for?
500 maybe, something like that in a normal match. Because you shoot sometimes with 12 frames a second just to get, as players are running, as players are coming together, you know, you're just shooting and trying to get a good action shot for whatever John and Graham want to use the photos for. So easily in one bit of play you could have 12, 15 shots of that one bit of play. And obviously some of them are going to be mince and you just bin them because they're out of focus or whatever. Because some of the boys do move a bit fast. Some of them don't, not so much, but about 500-600 some matches, yeah.
Brilliant. So I'm delighted to say that Tom is basically just waiting to come on to the studio. So
good.
Hopefully, power of perfect. There he is. How are we doing, Tom?
As well. Oh God.
Look at the top.
Oh, sorry, Tom. I can't hear you.
You get a mic on
That's me. Sorry, that's me. Mic's on now, guys.
There you
How
go.
are we all?
Not too bad, mate. How are you doing?
I'm good. I thought I would dress for the occasion, seeing as there's plenty of Clyde emblems in the background that I'm seeing just
Absolutely
now.
fantastic.
I love
it. Is that the very top?
I would like to say it is, but I think it was a long sleeve one I done against Celtic. But this is a short sleeve version that we got at the end of the season.
Just keep it above there. We'll go with it. Listen, thanks very much for your time, Tom. Greatly appreciated.
No, not at all.
It's fantastic to have you on board, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of Clyde fans with questions. Hopefully not just about that match. We will cover that, obviously, in great detail. I'm sure you've been asked about it to God knows how many times, but you did play 35 other matches for Clyde, in which time you scored 7 goals. It was a very good season, all in, I think, for the club. Played a lot of really good attacking football, finished mid-season. It started in somewhat crazy fashion with the X Factor style trials. How did your move to Clyde come about? I don't believe you were part of the trials.
No, you're well versed there in your knowledge. So I was one of the players that came in after the trials, believe it or not. So around about then, I think the kind of high profile game against Manchester United, which was obviously a good kind of money spinner for the club. I'd left Rangers that summer. Kind of under 21s. I'd been there for 10 years, and I'd been in a couple of trials. I went up to Ross County at the time. John Robertson was the manager up there, and was quite keen to sign me. But I then kind of midweek training with them, I had an offer to go down to Gillingham at the time, and Neil Cooper was the manager. So I kind of made that decision to go down the English road venture, and hopefully something would happen there. And lo and behold, it didn't. So I then had a phone call with John Robertson to see would they still be interested, and Ross County had kind of moved on, and that ended up being to Clyde's game. So I kind of come in, I think, the week before, believe it or not, the week before the season started. The first game of the season, believe it or not, was Ross County away. You couldn't have scripted that at the time. So I'd come in at the beginning of the week with a trial game against Hearts. I performed quite well in that game, and Graham and Joe were quite keen to get me on board, and it worked for me, and I really enjoyed it.
The rest, they say, is history.
They certainly do.
We'll come on to the history. Obviously, it is the main talking point. We're already getting questions down the right-hand side. Now, Nick, who is very familiar with the podcast, he has obviously helped us host it. is asking, other than the Celtic match, what was your favourite game as a Clyde player?
There's probably a couple kind of spring to mind for me personally. Obviously, there's no hiding it. I grew up and still am a massive Rangers fan. So to think that in the space of one season we were fortunate enough to get Rangers in the League Cup, or the CIS Cup as I believe it was called back then, and then within 2 months we played Celtic in the Scottish Cup. And it's probably bittersweet playing Rangers at Ibrox, because we were eight minutes away, and obviously the kind of, I would call Clyde diehards will probably remember, you know, more than me, but we were 8 minutes away from putting Rangers out the League Cup that season.
Yeah, deservedly so as well.
Absolutely.
And it would have been, to be honest, I think they'd rested one or two players as they do, and I remember kind of 65 minutes, Barry Ferguson getting stripped at the side of the park, and that showed you what kind of panic was in the Rangers team at that time to stick him on. And I think had we held out for that, you'd have probably had a Netflix documentary about what Clyde done that season, beating Celtic and Rangers. So that's probably one kind of the high profile game. One of the other games was actually a game we get beat. We played St Johnstone at home, and I believe we were possibly 3-0 down. I scored 2 myself, and then I'll remember in the 89th minute I had a sitter from about 4 yards, and I decided to flash it past the far post, and Craig's probably got a photograph of that just now that I don't want to see. So they're the 2 games that kind of stick out with me. Obviously, being a Rangers fan, was getting a chance to play at Ibrox as a Clyde player, and then obviously the St Johnstone game where I should have had a hat trick, and I believe that at the time Mark McGee was the Brighton manager and had come up to watch me that game, and obviously had put a bid in for me, but Graham and Joe were keen to keep me for the Scottish Cup run to the final that we all hoped. Sadly didn't materialise.
So, of your 7 goals, obviously you mentioned you scored 2 against St Johnstone there. Were there any particular favourites? There's one in my mind that I think it was Airdrie away. I think you took on half their team and rounded their keeper and knocked it in the top corner.
You're probably seeing the smile on my face just now, and you remember the goals as well as I do, and that there's actually one man at the club who I've got to thank in terms of he's actually dug out footage of all my goals from that season, and I've still to see them. Is Sid, the historian,
Okay.
as I'm sure you'll all know very well, and have spoke to at various times. So Sid assures me that I think he's managed to find them under about 6 inches of dust, and he's currently in the process of taping them onto a disc for me now, because it's in a VHS, which for the young viewers that are possibly tuning in just now won't have a clue what that is.
Google it. Need to Google it.
So the Airdrie goal, definitely. I scored another kind of decent goal at Dundee, actually, at Dens Park. But the Airdrie goal is the one that I think to this day I've still not seen back. And in your head you think you've taken on 8 players, but the harsh reality is you've probably taken on 2 and sclaffed it under the goalkeeper. But I look forward to getting a review of that one.
Am I right in saying that it was straight from kickoff? That it be just conceded?
Yes, I think we just.
Be...
No, I think you're right. I think we were possibly up maybe 2-0. They'd scored to make it 2-1, and I think I received the ball from one of our defenders actually, just on the halfway line, and then I just remember kind of turning, and I think Alan McManus and the other centre half were there, and I think the angle I was at, I managed to nip between the 2 of them, round the full-back, and then the goalkeeper, I think Stephen Robertson at the time, came out, and I've been he's kind of forced me wide, and then from a wide angle I've kind of hit it into the far post. So it was I was lucky. I played with a lot of really kind of clever, intelligent players and hungry players back at my time in Clyde, and we had quite a successful team that, in hindsight, had we kept that group together for maybe another year or 2 and possibly a wee bit more funding, etc., then we could have done something special. But
I think
it was a very young team.
Yeah, no, sorry, I probably maybe talking us down a wee bit there, and a couple shouting in. We did have a young team, to be honest, and I think that's where we were so successful. We had boys that had just been released from kind of failed Premier League clubs like myself, who didn't maybe have a football kind of base behind them. You'd obviously been brought up well at kind of Premier League clubs. I know that Stephen O'Donnell had came from Dundee United at the time. Paul McHale had come through the youths at Rangers. Craig Bryson had obviously came through at Clyde as well, kind of that young boy. So with a number of players, Chris Higgins, Craig McEwen as well, that were just really wanting to basically put a stamp on the team, and until the managers and coaches that had maybe felt that they'd been rejected. and I was in a similar situation. I remember being an under-21 player at Rangers, and you kind of lived the dream, although I only kind of played one first team game and had a couple of kind of appearances, pre-season friendlies. Been pulled off a bus at your kind of last under-21 game for Rangers to be told you're not going to be kept on. And then the big wide world's out there, and it happens to so many young kids now. And they just don't have, you know, the kind of education of what's the other side of the, you know, the coin, and that you've no sooner you've got that chance, and then it just gets taken away from you, and you've got to go and try and forge your own career.
Yeah, I think it was really well said in the Celtic commentary, where the team had, you know, no fear, and because they were that young team and they had been brought together in the trials, that they just wanted to impress, as you've mentioned. And I think that kind of worked out for that season and gave us a lot of fantastic memories. No,
it did. And, you know, I think that Graham and Joe obviously had their kind of differences at the end of that season and going forward, which was obviously kind of disappointing, having been in the changing room for that. But they've got to take a lot of credit for how they kind of galvanised all the boys, and almost they acted like kind of father figures to a number of us, and put an arm around you and make you feel that when you walk out that pitch that you're, 6'7" tall, your chest puffed out, and you're as good as the players, you're playing against. Because there was the whole circus of Roy Keane was in town, and this is Roy Keane's day, and you had cameramen from China, exactly. I'll never forget that day for many reasons. And I remember Craig Beattie, who actually stays in the kind of same town as me just now, went on in a really cracking, successful career, kind of pulling me before the game and just having a chat, and Keane's out to get you today, because I'd made no hiding that I was a massive Rangers fan in the build-up, and you do all the kind of chats and the kind of press work beforehand, and the Daily Record want a bit off you, and they kind of want the ex-Rangers player, etc. So I kind of set myself up to be shot at. So I think I had 3 or 4 of them lining up to have a kick at me, but fortunately nobody could catch me.
Obviously, you touched upon there the circus, which it was very much, for a Clyde fan's perspective, it was an absolute circus on the day, but in the weeks or the week up to the match, it was all just Roy Keane. And I think it's testament to just how good we were that day. That he barely, the few touches he got at the ball, he'd done nothing with it. Yeah, and this was a guy who is a legend at Manchester United. I think Craig Bryson, Stevie Masterton had phenomenal matches in the middle of the park for us that day.
I think where we benefited that day is we had players that had been playing week in, week out, playing 3 games a week, so that they're top of their game, 21 years old, 22 years old. It doesn't matter what kind of ability you've got. If you're fit and you can be mobile and get around the park. Broadway, you'll remember that day, very similar to the weather this week. It was kind of snowy, it was quite frosty. They don't have the UV lamps that they've got at the likes of Ibrox and Parkhead now, so I think there was more mud on the pitch than there was possibly grass. So certainly as a Celtic player turning up to Broadwood that day with the howling wind coming in off the Broadwood Loch, I don't think many of them fancied it, and we were just out the traps. And it was one of those games where it wasn't just 1 or 2. There was 11 men, just from minute 1. It was like possessed, to be honest. If I could ever relive one day in my whole life, it would be that day. It was surreal.
Yeah, I remember seeing that one, Tom. I remember coming home from the game, and we had recorded it on Sky, and immediately watched it back.
Aye,
and Charlie Nicholas looked at half time. And that broadcast studio, it was mental.
It was Jim White at half time. He kind of had Pat Bonner, I think it was, and Charlie Nicholas in Broadway studio, and he went, "Pat, Charlie, 2 goals disallowed, 2 goals scored under penalty miss."
It's echoing what's happening just now in Scottish football. I think it's taken 14 years to feel like that again, hasn't it?
But the smile on Jim White's face was incredible.
It was. No, it's many happy memories.
That was upgraded.
Obviously, about disallowed goals there, Craig, there is one we have to obviously ask you about, Tom. Did Kenny Clark ever get a Christmas card from you again, or...
Do you know what? I'm actually, just to interrupt, I'm actually just finished there speaking to my wife about this, because she's giving it, what are you going to talk about? You're just going to be so boring, and the guys aren't going to want to listen about your stories. And that was the story. That was the genuine. I've told a few kind of fans and probably people at the club when I've maybe been in the area lounge over the years, that one of the genuine stories was Kenny Clark actually bumped into him in Braehead, the next home store in Braehead for my sins. Women get a day on a Sunday where they get to drag you around the shops because they've got to follow you to your football on a Saturday.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of doting about the shops, and Kenny Clark kind of eyeballed me, and obviously being quite tall and skinhead, he put two and two together. So in fairness to Kenny, he actually come up to me that day, and he actually apologised. He almost had tears in his eyes. I say it kind of tongue in cheek and with a kind of smile on my face, thinking back to the day. But he knew, as a Rangers kind of fan growing up, and not just the kind of Rangers aspect of it, but just the chance to have been on television and score a goal, etc. That he's obviously looked back and evaluated his game and realised that he was in the wrong. So he was man enough to come up to me and apologise, which was nice, because he didn't need to do that, and he said he'd wanted to get in touch with me beforehand. So he got a lot of respect from me, and was, to be honest, was one of the better referees in Scottish football, albeit he had a bit of a nightmare that day.
Yeah. Boys, do you want to take the comments coming in?
Yep. So we've had a few comments, and I was going to ask this as well. So that day in January, we welcomed Douay to Broadwood. And your first half performance effectively welcomed and ended his Celtic career. Any thoughts on that? How was he to play against? That shoulder challenge.
Do you know what he was? I'll give him it. He was a big boy. He was a big, strong boy. I probably would say, looking back now, at the time you don't feel sorry for him. You just want to almost rough him up a wee bit, and I think that was down to kind of Graham beforehand, just saying the big man's never played in Scottish football before. He's probably never experienced the conditions. He's probably used to playing on pitches that Celtic play on week in, week out. But I think if I'm probably doing him an a disjustice, to be honest. I think that some of the other players that day, whether it be Keane, Lennon, I think Stephen McManus was playing as well. You had Harts and Maloney. So some of them have got to maybe take a wee bit of kind of ownership for possibly helping. The big man was the easy one to take off that day in Douay, and even now I was sitting thinking about it. He wasn't overly that bad. He just wasn't strong enough in that shoulder tackle that I went for. And then I think from there he was just like the kind of Churchill dog, and his head was just spinning for 45 minutes. So.
We've got another comment from Lynn as well. Have you taken in many matches at Broadwood since leaving Clyde? Obviously, you've mentioned you've been to the Area Lounge a few times. How's the reception been, and how are you enjoying coming back?
No, do you know what? I only stay kind of 2 or 3 miles away from Broadwood just now, and Clyde's definitely got a big bit of my heart for kind of what it done for my career and my life. And I've got a little man just now who kind of plays football as well, so the two of us are quite often down at Broadwood. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm at 18 or 19 home games a season like kind of all three of you, but I try to get down 5 or 6 times a season, round about kind of work and shifts, etc. And whenever I do go down, I get well and truly looked after. From kind of John Taylor when I first go in, David McPherson's good enough, and everybody up in the lounge, all the girls, Lynn, etc. From people that dealt with the tickets even back when I was there, and Craig. I've had a couple of dealings with Craig before, and everybody's so warm and welcoming, and it's probably one of the reasons why I go back to the club. It's all right growing up as a fan of one of the big two, but it's also nice to have that kind of smaller community stroke feel to it when you actually do feel a part of the club, and people actually want to take 5 minutes out of their day to maybe speak to you, which is quite nice. So I'm always approachable at the games. I'll never walk away. I'll give MD 10 minutes of my time, and happy to do so. And the 6 and 7 year old kids when I was growing up that loved that Clyde game are now 21, 22. So that's probably the only bit that I struggle with now. It's I remember when I was a kid watching that, and I just look at it. It makes you feel old now.
Yeah, I mean, you'll always obviously be welcome back, Tom. That goes without saying. Some of the comments, we've got Mark from Stewart Accounting Services, who's just wanting to say thank you for his favourite game is 40 years as a Clyde fan. The team that year was great, and probably his favourite team in his time supporting Clyde. And whilst it wasn't a league winning team, the memories from that one season will live with any Clyde fan.
Absolutely.
That had the privilege of watching the games.
Yeah, we did. We kind of played off the cuff. That's probably how I would describe it. There was obviously kind of tactics set out team. We were kind of well drilled, and we done what we were good at. To be honest, Graham and Joe were kind of set out the formation 3-5-2. We predominantly played, and myself and Alec played up front, and there was nobody that thought they were better than anybody else in the team. We all had the same hunger and desire to help a teammate out, and run that extra yard, and having Mikey McGowan and Eddie Malone in the two wings and delivering balls in, and just having the boys in the middle of the park as well, who, were clever players, and wee Bryson, even watching him now, my body shut down about 8 or 9 years ago, but I'm watching him, and he's picking up 1 or 2 injuries now, but to still even see him playing, kind of 20 years on from when he made his debut at Clyde, it definitely fills me with kind of a bit of pride as well, and catching up with him at this Clyde Celtic game in February was good, and I think now that he's got a wee bit more money, his dress sense is a hell of a lot better.
Remember he bleached his hair? He bleached blonde hair that day as well, mate.
I know. It was actually. Do you know what? It was bleached blonde, but it was the roots were coming back through.
Aye.
So I think it's bleached blonde for the Man U game, but I think 5 months later he was still holding on to it.
Do you keep in touch with many of the boys, Tom, or was that the first time you all of you kind of got together?
Yeah, it was probably. For those in the club that will know, I still obviously keep in touch with Roddy Hunter because I ended up marrying his sister. Mm-hmm. So that's the main one that I keep in touch with just now. Kind of other boys, I think you know what it's like yourselves, that everybody kind of drifts away, and I think a lot of them are on different career paths now, as opposed to Bryson's the main high profile one now that's actually still playing. But I'm not, and I know that kind of Stephen O'Donnell and Higgy and Craig McEwen, etc. I think they're possibly even still in a kind of group chat and go for nights out kind of pre-COVID and stuff, which is nice that they've kind of kept their kind of circle and spend a lot of time together as well, kind of out with the football, which is which is good. But no, other than hitting the golf course with Roddy now and trying to break 100, there's not too much catching up with the boys.
We've got a couple of comments kind of to do with the aftermath of the Celtic game. Dean McCurdy is asking if you all took Monday off work or pulled a sickie to celebrate the win against Celtic.
True story. I actually went down to a night, not that any of you'll know because it's a nightclub in Ayrshire, but there's a nightclub called Club de Mar, and I was staying in Kilmarnock at the time. So I had decided to go all the way down there and have a few drinks. Mother and father my mum and dad were at the game actually, and kind of en route to the night out because they're too old for nightclubs, decided to drive along Paisley Road West. And there was 1 or 2 kind of red, white and blue pubs that let's just say they bought myself, my mum and dad a few drinks. So the fact that I walked in with the Clyde emblem on my tracksuit after the result, I think there was a few that had enjoyed that game even more so than me. So not a penny was spent for a couple of hours.
One of the memories I've got going into high school the next day. So that
getting into high school.
Well, now you're making me feel really old. I'm trying to face straight on here so you don't see the grey hairs.
I had a similar thing. So I went in and it was just all Rangers fans congratulating me as if I had somehow.
Yeah, brilliant.
But it was a great day, and even more so, I had taken my dad, who's a massive Rangers fan, so I think he enjoyed it as much as me.
No, definitely. So I definitely wasn't at training the next day anyway. I'll tell you that for nothing. I don't think any of the boys were. I think we get thrown in taxis about 3 a.m. at all the various different nightclubs around where you stayed in the local area at that time, and you were almost carted up the road like a king. And then the best bit the next day was buying it would have been the Daily Record on the Monday, because obviously the game was the Sunday, and it was to check your rating, and then you would be straight on the blower to your mates and how did I get an 8 and you get a 9? So that was the kind of banter you had back then, just kind of riffing. I had a car school at the time with Alec Williams and Kevin Bradley and kind of Neely McGregor and Stevie Masterton. So the kind of 3 Ayrshire boys, me, Neely and Stevie, would obviously meet in Kilmarnock and travel up. And Monday was actually the notorious day that Alec and Taz, as he's affectionately known, be Kevin, the two of them would maybe come down with like a sore throat or something. So Monday, I don't really think Monday was part of their working week, to be honest. So that was a standing joke in the club that year that they would turn up and train on Tuesday, but I think Sunday nights in Carbon and Glasgow were too good.
Boys here, I think we've got another comment from Mark to do with the next match in that Scottish Cup run.
Yeah, so obviously put out Celtic. We think we're going to win the whole thing, and then the resurgent Gretna that year. Do you or the squad kind of regret that game? given on that they went to the final that year?
I think probably regrets maybe not the correct word. I think there's probably frustrations. I think you'll possibly remember the first game. We actually get beaten the replay down at Gretna on the Tuesday night, which was a howling horrible night, and we were well beaten that night. I don't make any, kind of hide from that fact. They were a decent team. I think they actually got the win that night, and within 15-20 minutes had built a 3-0 lead. And they were a very workmanlike team at the time. They kind of older pros in their team, John O'Neill, Kenny Duker, strong physical. Grady, yeah. They knew how to play the game, and it's probably the one thing, kind of, Craig, looking back, that I think that we struggled with that season, kind of for league form, whenever we come up against St Mirren, just to kind of digress away from that game, first of all. When we played St Mirren that year, they had the boy Ian Maxwell at the back, they had Kevin McGowan, they had Andy Millen, Kurt Broadfoot, they had kind of proper, I would say, kind of, men of football that had played 400-500 games. St Johnstone were very, very much the same that season. They had Alan McManus, Kevin James, big, strong, physical boys, and they two teams finished above us, and rightly so, because they were stronger, they were more powerful. And it's my kind of recollection of the Gretna game. We drew 0-0 at home on the Saturday, which was the round after Celtic, and I think we possibly hit the post and had a couple of penalty appeals turned down. We weren't great. They probably done their homework on us and knew that we were quite a kind of physically able team, get about the park quite well, and I think they almost kind of nullified us that day with the view of, trying to get us back to their pitch for the return leg. And look, they got to the final in the end. They obviously were more than a talented team to get there. And I think, in looking back, it's frustration. Frustration definitely born more than probably regret. I know the rest of the Clyde fans probably, when you beat Celtic, you expect to go on and beat Gretna when they were the league below you, but they had a number of good players that season.
Was there a difficulty, like in the aftermath of the Celtic game, just for general league games, just to try and keep that mentality? Obviously, you're away up here, and then, with no disrespect to the teams in the league, it's a different ball game. You're up against Roy Keane to potentially up against, obviously,
up against the
caliber player.
Up against the Brecon Hedge.
I mean, we're talking levels here, so making sure that you keep that focus. Was there any difficulty, or do you think that was okay within the squad?
I would like to think no. Obviously, heads do get turned. There's no lie in that when your agents start phoning saying, there's other managers coming to watch you, and you're getting pulled in from the club saying, look, so and so's interested. Certainly my situation, so and so's interested in you. However, we're keen to keep you for the Scottish Cup run. So I would almost probably say, looking back, that I personally probably did feel that wee bit extra bit of pressure, because the club are saying, look, we've had a bid for you. However, we're not going to accept that. We see as possibly progressing in the Scottish Cup, which obviously there's monetary value in that, earning the club if they could have got to the Scottish Cup, say, semi-final at Hampden or whatever, and then you're maybe looking at taking 10,000-15,000 Clyde fans. If you maybe get the other half of the Old Firm or a Hibs or a Hearts, you're looking at a sellout which more than possibly pays for the money that the clubs had possibly bid. But once the transfer window had shut, there was nothing you could do then as a player. So I remember being fully focused, but I think at that time we probably just struggled with consistency. We could go out and play really well in games and pick up 3 points, but then the following week, a winnable game like Brecon, we could go and slip up, down there. So that was probably the most difficult bit, was just not getting that recipe to churn out the games week in, week out. But we didn't have the luxury at the time of squads of St Mirren and St Johnstone, who maybe had 18 or 19, kind of full-on professional kind of players that had played the game for 10 years. We were running with essentially, kind of the X Factor trials. We were running with maybe 8 or 9 boys that had played probably 50 games between them at the start of that season, who were still finding their feet. And when you've got young boys coming into a team, they're going to have kind of peaks and troughs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Joe Miller was probably the oldest registered player, and I think that was a surprise to us all that he did register as a player. I think he came on quite late in the Celtic game, from memory. I think he was last.
He actually came on in the... sorry boys if you want to jump in there, but he brought himself on. I say he brought himself on. I think Graham threw him on against Dundee, I believe, in possibly the second game of the season, I think, which is probably what kind of kick-started our season. I think we were 1-0 down to Dundee that day, and Joe actually came on, believe it or not, and scored. in the last kind of 10-15 minutes. So although he was kind of the wrong side of his career, he still had the good feet, and he was a good kind of sound head to bring on in a game for the last 10 minutes to see a game out.
He'd won it all in Scotland, leagues, Scottish Cups, etc.
I was going to say, Joe Miller made Showboat on Soccer AM for that Gretna. So clearly had it Walker.
I would like to see that. I'm an avid soccer AM watcher, but I can't remember seeing Joe in it. But I'll take your word for it.
I actually remember what happened. They got the ball out in the wing, and he just. I don't think it was. I don't think he meant it, but he just ran round the ball. Yeah.
Do you know what Joe was actually good for? See, when we were trying to waste time, just to tell a quick anecdote. Whenever we would take a throw in, if Joe got it and he had a chance to drive into the box from the wide area and cross the ball, if we were trying to waste time, he would run in 10 yards and then he would just turn on the ball and then he would sprint back out to the kind of throw-in line again, and that was just, he used to do it in training all the time, and that was just his way of, protecting the ball, keeping the ball, which sometimes in games you need to do. It's not all about trying to attack every time, and I think the two Old Firm teams could probably take a wee bit of kind of ownership of that tactic.
So, just kind of, we'll touch upon obviously the after Clyde for yourself. So, at the end of the season, you moved down to Millwall, and they were a championship team at the time, I believe. How was your time down there? Was it frustration?
Probably a bit of stop-start, to be honest. I obviously was fortunate at Clyde. I had the full season where I think maybe I missed one game through injury. When I went down to Millwall, I had kind of maybe 3 months into the season. I had a kind of bad injury on my ankle, and it was one that I had to kind of sit at the side for 2 or 3 months to try and let it settle. And then when I tried to come back, I ended up rolling my ankle again, which led me on to needing an operation on my ankle. And it just kind of snowballed from there. I think there's kind of a lot of biomechanics things, not to bore you all, but I think when you then have kind of operations on these parts of your body, that other parts then can potentially fail. And having been 2 years down at Millwall, I moved back to St Mirren. And similar at St Mirren, a year into my 2-year contract there, I ruptured my ACL, my MCL, and my kind of meniscus, and I was out for 18 months, and it was always almost the beginning of the end. You're kind of mid to late 20s then, and you think 3-4 years ago you've got the kind of world ahead of you, and you've got the chance to go and do something down south, and no regrets about it. It was loved the time there, being down with my wife, kind of pre-kids, and spending 2 years in London, and we've got a lot of happy memories. And then coming back up to St Mirren, but I just kind of tinge with regret the injuries that I had. And Clyde was, believe it or not, the only season I think I stayed injury free, because even pre-Clyde I had a couple of operations on my ankles at Rangers as well. So it's without being the usual hard luck story, a footballer, I'd done plenty in my career that I enjoy and look back on, but I think if I could have just possibly stayed injury free, then I would have liked to have seen potentially where I feel I could have went to, which is possibly even higher than the Championship, but never. I mean,
absolutely. You look at the Scottish Cup final. You obviously you put yourself on that big stage, man of the match. I think you were awarded. Is that right?
I wish it was a Scottish Cup final.
I know.
We'll just call it that.
Did I say Scottish Cup final?
Yeah.
It's good though. Right. This is water, honestly.
Yeah. You're right.
But no, obviously the Scottish Cup match against Celtic. Man of the match, and when you went to Millwall, I had full confidence that you were going to be a success down there. So it was frustrating for Clyde fans as well, because we knew how good a player you were, and to see it not obviously work for yourself was obviously disappointing. We've got another quick question from Mark Boyce.
So who was the best player you played with and played against in your career?
And don't say Roy Keane, because he's still in Bryce's pockets. So.
No. Do you want to know? Probably, I would probably say, and I've said this to one or two players, people before, it's probably one of the best players that I've played against was in a reserve game for St Mirren. I played against Celtic reserves and came up against Paddy McCourt. Now, I wasn't directly against Paddy McCourt, but he was playing centre mid that day. Now, Paddy McCourt had more ability. He was almost George Best-esque. In terms of some of the old videos that I've watched George Best, a low centre of gravity, he wanted the opposing player, Paddy McCourt, to come into him really close, and then he would just drop the shoulder and go. And it was to the point it was unplayable that he actually got taken off at half time in that reserve game, and then played for Celtic in the first team on the Saturday. And it's a boy that I look at and just think his career, never went where it should have went. For total raw ability and kind of skills, it was unplayable that day, and it was a joy to watch. And probably the best player that I played with. It's probably a slight cheat again. I played with a number of good players in a lot of kind of Rangers reserve games, etc. Ronald de Boer is the one that sticks out more than most.
He was all right, I suppose.
He wasn't bad, and again, just somebody that was a dedicated professional. He came to Rangers at the kind of latter stage of his career, when he had a number of knee injuries. His body couldn't do what it possibly could have done 8 or 9 years before. But you ask any Rangers fan, he's probably only sits behind Brian Laudrup and maybe Michael Moles and Paul Gascoigne. He was kind of just a Rolls Royce of a player. Great upper body strength, great ability taking the ball in his feet, and was very unselfish. As for Clyde players, it would have to be Bryso. Bryso would definitely be the best player I played with, just for what he's dedicated his life to, to be where he is now, and pretty much his family travelled here, there, and everywhere. He's looked after himself. He always conducted himself in the right way here, and he was almost that boy that you just see out your window kicking a ball against a wall. There's not enough of them just now. I think it's all kind of went computer crazy now with PlayStations and Xboxes, but certainly when I was growing up in the era, it was jumpers for goalposts. And Bryson's he just epitomised that. That was just what he was like. He was loved coming in every day, trained 100%, and definitely got out of the game what he deserved.
Yeah, fantastic player, and hopefully maybe one day we'll see him back in a Clyde jersey.
Yes.
Well, yes, hope so.
Tom, just before we finish up, and thank you again for your time, do you have just a quick word for the Clyde fans just before we wrap up?
Yeah, of course. No, I appreciate everybody kind of not just tuning in just now live. There'll almost be certainly people that will be kind of viewing this later on as well. But just stick with the club just now. It's obviously difficult times. The club have done really well over the last few years. They're in good hands with kind of Danny Lennon as the manager, Alan Moore, and they've also got the kind of people behind the scenes, yourselves included. There's plenty of other ones, whether it be John Taylor, Dave McPherson. There's a number of them. Bully the Bull, whoever that may be. But just have a good Christmas, have a good New Year, and hopefully we'll see everybody back in the lounge in the near future now that this vaccine's hopefully going to get rolled out. But thanks very much for having me again tonight. Really enjoyed it.
Absolute pleasure, Tom. Yeah. And to yourself, Craig, as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Boise, as usual. You'll be back next week. And yep, same again. We'll see you next Friday, 7 p.m. live. We'll let you know what we've got lined up for the show in due course. And until then, come on the Clyde.
On the Clyde. Cheers, gents.